That car isn't yours. But what happened next shattered the arrogant woman's pride. The sun had barely risen over the Miami skyline, casting long golden rays across the sleek glass facade of the Marina Vista residences, a towering monument of luxury and exclusivity. The marble driveway shimmered with a fresh polish, and the doorman in a navy blazer stood stiffly by the entrance, nodding only to familiar faces. Linda Miller stood just outside the circle of valet traffic, clutching her modest beige handbag with both hands. Dressed in a clean blouse, tan slacks, and flats, she looked slightly out of place among the fitness models walking small dogs and retirees in tennis whites. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tidy bun. She glanced down at her phone, checking the time again. 8:03 a.m. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from habit. After years of working around people who barely acknowledged her, she'd learned to stay small, quiet, unnoticeable. But this morning, for the first time, she wasn't here to work. She was just waiting. That simple act, however, was enough to draw attention. A young couple with iced lattes passed by, whispering and glancing back at her. One woman in a sun hat steered her dog slightly away, casting a confused glance, as if wondering why a cleaning lady was loitering outside the main entrance. Linda didn't meet their eyes. She didn't need to. Then came the sound that made her stomach turn, a sharp click of heels on stone. The rhythm was deliberate, confident, authoritative. Margaret Campbell, 62, stepped out of the building like she owned the entire block. Clad in a crisp white blouse, tailored black pants, and a silk scarf that screamed European designer, she moved toward her black BMW as if the car had been waiting just for her. Her sunglasses were large, covering most of her face, but her mouth curved downward in a permanent sneer of disapproval. And the moment she saw Linda standing near the curb, that sneer deepened. "You again," Margaret muttered, loud enough to be heard. "What is this? The second time this week?" Linda turned slightly. "I'm just waiting for someone." Margaret ignored the explanation, walking toward her vehicle and inspecting it like a hawk circling prey. She froze by the rear passenger door, crouched slightly, and pointed at something invisible. "Oh no, 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 no," she hissed. "Do you see this? This scratch? You were standing right here. You touched my car, didn't you?" Linda blinked, confused. "Ma'am, I didn't touch anything." "Don't lie to me," Margaret snapped, straightening up. Her voice rose several decibels. "I saw you leaning on it like it was some kind of park bench. Who even lets people like you loiter in front of this building?" A few residents nearby turned to look. A dog barked in the distance. The doorman shifted awkwardly, but said nothing. Linda's cheeks flushed. "I wasn't loitering. I'm waiting for my ride." Margaret crossed her arms. "Sure. Waiting. That's what they all say. You people think just because you've worked here before you can hang around wherever you like." "You people." The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone stifled a laugh. Another person took out their phone, not to call for help, but to record. Linda tried to remain still, though her jaw tightened. "I used to work here, yes, but I don't anymore." Margaret smirked. "That doesn't mean you belong here. This is private property, not your little cleaning zone. Next thing I know, you'll be knocking on doors asking for donations." That one stung, but Linda didn't move. More people had gathered now. Some were pretending to check their mail. Others just stood on the sidelines waiting to see what would happen next. No one stepped in. No one told Margaret to stop. Margaret stepped closer, her voice like venom. "You think dressing up in a discount blouse makes you one of us? Please, you're not fooling anyone. You belong on the other side of the door mopping floors." Linda's eyes welled up. She tried not to blink. She wouldn't give Margaret the satisfaction. From the corner, a resident, a man in his 30s with earbuds, muttered, "Damn, that's harsh," but didn't intervene. The doorman cleared his throat. "Ms. Campbell, perhaps we should—" She spun around. "Don't you start with me. I pay over $1,800 a month in HOA fees. I'll speak to whoever I want. I'm protecting property values here." Linda's heart pounded. Her ride was late. She just needed 10 more minutes. 5. Anything to get away from this. Then, the moment broke. A sleek, silver Tesla Model S turned the corner and pulled into the driveway. It slowed, then stopped right in front of them with a quiet hum. The car's gull-wing door lifted gently, like wings unfolding. From the driver's seat stepped a woman, tall, poised, maybe in her early 30s. Her black heels tapped smartly against the stone as she stepped forward. A navy blue blazer hugged her frame, and her hair was pulled back into a perfect low bun. Her eyes scanned the scene with a kind of quiet authority. Jessica Miller, Linda's daughter. She didn't speak right away. She just looked. First at Margaret, then at Linda, then at the small crowd gathered like spectators at a private execution. "Mom," she said calmly, stepping toward Linda. Linda's lips trembled, not from fear this time, but relief. Jessica's gaze returned to Margaret, icy, but calm. "Is there a problem here?" Margaret raised her chin, clearly thrown off. "I was just asking your friend here to step away from the vehicle she may have scratched." Jessica didn't respond right away. She took a slow breath, her eyes never leaving Margaret's. Her voice was cool and steady when she finally spoke again. "She didn't touch your car," Margaret scoffed. "Oh, really? And how would you know that?" Jessica gave her a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Because that woman," she paused, placing a hand gently on Linda's shoulder, "is my mother." A sharp intake of breath came from someone in the crowd. Margaret blinked. "Your mother?" Jessica nodded. "Yes, and you just made a serious mistake." For the first time all morning, Margaret Campbell had nothing to say. The scene had shifted. The crowd felt it. The atmosphere went still, almost reverent. Linda stood a little taller. Jessica looked around. Anyone else want to accuse her of being out of place? Silence. She turned back to Linda. "Let's go." And as mother and daughter walked toward the Tesla, the people who had once stared now stepped out of the way. The door lifted again. Linda climbed in slowly, holding her head just a little higher. Margaret stood alone by her car, lips parted, eyes darting, suddenly unsure of where she belonged. And the street, moments ago buzzing with judgment, fell quiet beneath the weight of truth. The moment Jessica stepped out of her car, the air around the entrance of Marina Vista shifted. It wasn't just the polished lines of her suit or the quiet confidence in her stride. It was the sudden, unmistakable shift in energy. People noticed her immediately. She didn't say a word. Not yet. Her eyes scanned the scene with clinical precision. Margaret Campbell standing puffed up like a wounded hawk. A small crowd of residents pretending to be invested in their phones or pets. And at the center, her mother. Linda's head was lowered slightly, her fingers clenched into the strap of her handbag. Her body language said everything: shame, humiliation, a desire to vanish into the concrete beneath her feet. Jessica felt her jaw tighten, but she didn't rush in. She walked slowly, heels clicking against the stone driveway, silent, observing. Margaret took notice, of course. She straightened up, adjusted her scarf, and looked Jessica over with the instinctive scrutiny of someone used to identifying social status at a glance. Jessica's tailored navy suit, silk blouse, and understated diamond earrings passed the test. "Excuse me," Margaret said, smiling politely, her tone suddenly shifting. "This doesn't concern you, just a misunderstanding with building staff." Jessica tilted her head slightly, as if weighing a diagnosis. She turned her eyes to Linda and spoke softly. "Mom?" Linda looked up. Her eyes, red at the edges, flickered with both relief and embarrassment. "Jess, I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Jessica smiled gently, but her focus quickly returned to Margaret. "Trouble?" she asked. "Seems like that's coming from somewhere else." Margaret's smile wavered. "Oh, I wasn't aware she was. Your mother, I mean. She was just standing close to my car and there's a scratch. I assumed she—" Jessica interrupted, her tone still cool but sharper now. "You assumed." Margaret blinked. "Well, yes. I mean, people need to be mindful around vehicles in a building like this. Some of us—" Jessica cut in again. "Let me guess. You thought she was the cleaning staff?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. One of the doormen adjusted his tie and looked away. Margaret forced a chuckle. "There's no need to make this about—" "No need to make this about what?" Jessica asked. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "About how you saw a woman with darker skin, standing alone, not wearing designer sunglasses, and decided she didn't belong. Now, no one was pretending to look at their phones." Jessica stepped closer, just enough to close the gap but not enough to be aggressive. "My mother has more dignity in her silence than you've shown in your entire performance this morning." Margaret's eyes flicked to the others, looking for someone to step in. No one did. Jessica continued. "You didn't just accuse her of damaging your car. You humiliated her in front of your neighbors. You spoke to her like she was less than you, and you did it with full confidence that no one would challenge you." Her eyes scanned the crowd. "And you were right." The words hit hard, sharp and direct. Several residents looked down. One woman walked her dog a little further away. Jessica looked back to Margaret. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Jessica Miller. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon at St. Vincent's. I've operated on infants, athletes, and CEOs. Last month I was named in Forbes' 30 Under 40 list for medical innovation." Margaret's mouth opened slightly, as if forming a response that never quite came. "And as of yesterday," Jessica added, "I am the new owner of Unit 1502, which means my mother," she said, turning toward Linda with pride in her voice, "is no longer here as staff. She's here as a resident, as my guest, as family." You could hear a pin drop. Jessica's voice remained calm, but her eyes had fire. She spent 20 years working in this building, waking up before dawn, missing holidays, cleaning your floors, scrubbing your kitchens. Not one of you ever asked her name. A few people glanced at one another, sheepish. "She put me through college, through med school. She gave up her life so I could build mine." Jessica turned again to the group. "And this morning, she stood here quietly, respectfully, while you watched someone try to strip her of every ounce of that dignity, and you did nothing." Silence. Margaret, now visibly red, stammered, I had no idea." "That's the problem," Jessica replied softly. "You never even cared to ask." The doorman stepped forward awkwardly. "Dr. Miller, on behalf of the staff, I'd like to—" "You don't need to apologize for her," Jessica said, waving him off gently. "This isn't about one moment. It's about a culture that lets moments like this happen every day." She looked at her mother again, who stood frozen in awe and disbelief, tears still gathering at the edges of her eyes. Jessica reached out her hand. "Come on, Mom. Let's go home." Linda hesitated just for a second, then placed her hand in her daughter's. Together they turned toward the car. The Tesla door rose like a curtain call. Linda stepped in with grace, guided by the daughter who refused to let her be erased. Jessica paused one last time before getting into the driver's seat. She looked back at the crowd, her gaze locking with Margaret's. There was no anger, just truth. "You don't get to define who belongs," she said. Then she closed the door. The Tesla pulled away in silence, leaving behind the hum of awkward murmurs and the weight of a moment that no one could quite escape from. Margaret stood alone now, the scratch on her car forgotten. Her authority unraveled not by shouting, but by the simple, undeniable force of truth. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Unit 1502, casting a soft glow over the polished hardwood floors. The space smelled of new furniture and fresh paint, new beginnings. Linda stood at the threshold of the living room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hadn't moved from that spot for nearly 5 minutes. Jessica walked in behind her, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Still feels surreal, doesn't it?" Linda nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the open-concept kitchen, the gleaming countertops, the modern light fixtures that looked more like artwork than anything practical. "I used to scrub grout just like that," she whispered. "Right down on my knees, same tiles, same scent of bleach." Jessica handed her a mug. Now it smells like vanilla and espresso. Your home, your rules. Linda smiled faintly, but her shoulders didn't relax. 25 years earlier. The Miami air was thick with heat and uncertainty. Linda was younger then, barely 30, and clutching the hand of a 5-year-old Jessica as they stepped off the bus from the Immigration Processing Center. Everything they owned was stuffed into 2 second-hand suitcases. The first job was at a hotel laundry room. The second was cleaning houses. The third, cleaning condos at Marina Vista. She didn't complain. Linda didn't know how to. Not because she didn't feel exhausted or hurt, but because there was simply no room for self-pity when your child needed food, when rent was due, when you had no backup plan. And Jessica, bright, curious, with eyes that noticed everything, grew up in those spaces. While other children played with toys, Jessica played with flashcards and textbooks. She'd sit in the lobby of Marina Vista after school, doing homework while her mother cleaned penthouses with ocean views. "I'm gonna be a doctor," she once told Linda while practicing multiplication on a napkin. Linda had smiled then, brushing sweat from her forehead. "Then you'd better keep studying, mi amor." She never told Jessica how many nights she cried herself to sleep from pain, physical, emotional, financial. She never said how much it stung when residents left dirty dishes and refused to make eye contact. They didn't see her. Only her uniform. Now. Word spread quickly through Marina Vista. Residents whispered in the elevator, speculated at the pool. The woman from the parking lot? That was her daughter? A surgeon? Some tried to distance themselves from Margaret's actions. Others, more performative, suddenly greeted Linda with sugar-coated smiles. "How are you enjoying the unit, Mrs. Miller? You have such a lovely daughter, so accomplished." It wasn't kindness. It was image management. Margaret Campbell hadn't been seen since that morning, but her presence still lingered, especially in the way Linda felt eyes follow her through the halls, polite voices masking judgment. Jessica noticed. "You okay?" she asked, placing her hand gently on her mother's back as they stepped into the sunlit bedroom. Linda hesitated. "I know I should be happy, proud, and I am. Jessica waited. "I don't want them to see me and think I'm here by accident, like I snuck in with the groceries." Jessica looked at her mother. Really looked. At the lines on her face, the calluses on her hands, the quiet strength in her spine. "You earned this," she said, "more than any of them." Linda's eyes glistened. Jessica grinned, trying to lighten the moment. "Also, you live with a heart surgeon now, so if anyone gives you trouble, I can just clinically embarrass them." Linda laughed softly. "You always had that fire in you." Jessica sat down on the window bench. "And you built it. Every missed birthday, every double shift, every night you came home with cracked hands and still helped me study. That's what got me here." Linda sat beside her. "And now look at you, hosting dinner parties like some rich lady." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Funny you say that." Linda's smile faltered. "What?" "I want to host a small gathering," Jessica said casually. "To introduce us properly. Make it clear we're not hiding." Linda stared. "You want to throw a party? For these people?" "Not for them," Jessica replied. "For us. You deserve to be seen, not as the woman who used to scrub their floors, but as the woman who raised a doctor, as a resident, as my mother." Linda bit her lip. "What if they don't come?" "Then we'll drink wine and eat too many hors d'oeuvres by ourselves." Linda shook her head, overwhelmed by the idea. "You think Margaret will show up?" Jessica smiled. "I hope she does." Meanwhile, behind closed doors in Unit 1003, Margaret Campbell sat at her dining table, surrounded by silence. The curtains were drawn. Her phone buzzed with texts from neighbors. "Did you see the daughter's car?" "Turns out Linda's her mom." "Kind of brave what she said, huh?" Margaret didn't respond. She sat in her spotless kitchen, sipping lukewarm tea, wondering for the first time in years if her words had finally cost her something more than a social misstep. She glanced at the mirror across the room, and for a brief moment didn't like what she saw looking back. Back in Unit 1502, Linda stood in the hallway, watching the movers arrange the last pieces of furniture. Family photos were being unpacked. A framed picture of young Jessica in a homemade Halloween costume. Another of Linda, tired but proud, holding her daughter at a graduation ceremony. "I was thinking," Jessica said, holding up a framed newspaper clipping, "we put this one in the entryway." It was a short article from a local paper. "Daughter of housekeeper becomes renowned heart surgeon." Linda looked at it, eyes misty. "Are you sure?" Jessica nodded. "Let them read the headline before they open their mouths." They laughed together. For a moment, there was peace. Real, quiet peace. Then came the knock at the door. Jessica opened it to find the building's community manager, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Miller," he said with a tight smile, "I hear you're planning a welcome gathering. We'd be happy to offer the rooftop lounge for it." Jessica blinked. "That's very generous." He nodded. "Well, it's time the residents got to know the newest family in the building." Linda stood behind her daughter, still unsure, but a little taller than the day before. Jessica smiled. "Let's make it a night to remember." The rooftop lounge of Marina Vista had never looked so alive. String lights cast a warm golden glow over sleek patio furniture and perfectly set cocktail tables. Soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers. Waitstaff moved between guests with trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres. The Miami skyline sparkled in the distance like a million silent witnesses. Jessica stood near the bar in a deep green dress, calm and composed, sipping sparkling water while greeting neighbors one by one. Her presence alone shifted the mood. She had authority without arrogance, charm without pretense. Guests came cautiously at first. Some residents were genuinely curious. Others arrived wearing thin layers of politeness over thicker layers of guilt. Their compliments came fast and rehearsed. "I heard you're a surgeon. How fascinating. You decorated the apartment yourself? It's so elegant. Your mother is just lovely, so quiet, so gracious." Jessica smiled at each one, knowing which words were genuine and which were performative. Linda, dressed in soft blue and standing near the buffet table, nodded shyly as people approached her with awkward warmth. "I don't think I've ever officially introduced myself," one woman said, extending a hand. "I live on 11. You must be so proud of your daughter." Linda gave a small nod. "I am. Very." From a corner, a man leaned toward his partner. "She looks different now that she's not in the uniform." The partner gave him a look. "She was always the same. You just never looked." As the evening went on, Jessica moved gracefully through conversations. She discussed cardiology with one group, architecture with another. Her intelligence disarmed people, her warmth unsettled them. She wasn't what they expected, but then again, neither was Linda. The mood was cautiously celebratory until it shifted. At 8:47 p.m., the elevator dinged. Margaret Campbell stepped out, wearing a navy dress with sharp shoulders and an icy necklace that matched her expression. She walked into the party uninvited, unannounced, and unapologetic. The chatter dulled instantly. Jessica saw her. Linda did too. Margaret moved through the space like she still owned it. Her smile was tight, her eyes scanning for weakness. She approached Jessica with the confidence of someone used to getting ahead by pretending nothing ever happened. "Dr. Miller," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "Lovely evening." Jessica didn't flinch. "I wasn't expecting you." "Well, we all have to learn to move past things, don't we?" Margaret said, lowering her voice just enough. "You've certainly made a statement." Jessica tilted her head. "That's one way to put it. I just wanted to stop by, extend my congratulations and assure you that what happened was blown out of proportion. Emotions get high. People make assumptions. You understand." A few guests were now listening. Margaret noticed and turned slightly, ensuring her smile was visible. "I mean, your mother is very composed." It was all just a misunderstanding. Before Jessica could respond, a voice from the other side of the lounge interrupted. "I don't think it was," said Mr. Langdon, a quiet man from the 6th floor. He held up his phone. "I recorded the whole thing that morning, from my balcony. The audio's pretty clear." Margaret paled. "That's hardly necessary." "It is," he said simply. "You should hear what you sound like when you think no one's listening." Murmurs rippled across the room. Jessica turned to the crowd. She hadn't planned a speech, but the moment called for something more than silence. She stepped toward the center of the space and gently set her glass down. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, voice steady but personal. "Some of you are here out of curiosity, some out of guilt, and some because you genuinely wanted to welcome us. I'm grateful for all of it, because this is what change looks like." She glanced at her mother, who stood frozen near the far wall. "I want to tell you a story about a woman who came to this country with a daughter, 2 bags, and no money. She worked 4 jobs at once. She cleaned houses, restaurants, and yes, this building." A hush fell over the guests. "For 20 years, she took care of your spaces while no one saw her. She heard your complaints about water spots on mirrors. She picked up after your kids. She mopped your mud, even when you walked through it in front of her." Jessica's voice didn't tremble. It sharpened. She was invisible, but she never made herself small. She taught her daughter to dream, to push, to fight for a seat at every table people told her she didn't belong at. She looked directly at Margaret. "And now that woman lives here, not in your shadows, not behind your doors, but here, with you, above you even, on the 15th floor." Margaret shifted, visibly uncomfortable. Jessica paused. "And I want you all to remember something. Respect begins in how we treat people when we think no one's watching. Not when there's a crowd, not when there are consequences, but in the quiet moments when you believe no one important is looking." The silence afterward was heavier than applause. Jessica stepped back. Linda met her eyes, speechless. Margaret set her glass down, face red. She turned and walked away. Past the buffet, past the smiles, through the elevator doors that closed with a soft ding. The spell broke. Slowly, people returned to their drinks, but the atmosphere had changed. Eyes that once ignored Linda now met hers. Smiles were slower, more genuine. One woman approached her. "Mrs. Miller, I owe you an apology. For a lot of years I didn't even look up." "I'm sorry." Linda's voice was soft, but firm. "Thank you." Later that night, the guests were gone. The rooftop lights dimmed. Jessica walked her mother back upstairs in quiet companionship. They stepped onto their balcony. The city pulsed below. Cars, lights, life. Linda rested her arms on the railing, breathing in the warm December air. "I still feel like I'm borrowing this life," she said quietly. Jessica leaned next to her. "No, you built it." Linda looked over the city, her eyes reflecting the skyline. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was standing in someone else's world. She was standing in her own, finally seen, finally home.